Hello and welcome back to another video where today we are going to be talking about the potential next Assassin's Creed game called Assassin's Creed Rift. As the most recent DLC for Assassin's Creed Valhalla Dawn of Ragnarok has just released, I thought now would be the perfect time to speak about the future of the Assassin's Creed series. We first learned about AC Rift back in early February of 2022 by a Bloomberg article written by Jason Schreier. Those of you who aren't aware, Jason Schreier, he is quite prolific in the Assassin's Creed leak scene, as he has been leaking the settings of the games from as far back as I can remember. The first one I remember learning about was AC Victory, which turned out to be Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and since then he has successfully managed to leak which time setting the Assassin's Creed series will go next. So I think we can call Jason Schreier a pretty reliable leaker if we just look at his track record. And that brings us to the leak of AC Rift. It's highly unlikely that the game will actually be called Assassin's Creed Rift. So like with previous games, they are given a code name, which is changed when the game is officially announced. And what is said in the article is quite interesting, as apparently Rift was going to be an expansion for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but apparently late last year Ubisoft decided to turn it into a full game to kind of pad out their release window for the year. The game is supposedly going to star Basim as the protagonist, and it's most likely going to be set before the events of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, showing him maybe in Baghdad, as in a Eurogamer article they said that that could be a possibility. Another thing that was stated in the Bloomberg article is that the game wouldn't be a massive open world game like Valhalla. It would instead go back to kind of previous style of games where it focuses more on stealth. And the last thing that I stated in the article is that the game is set to release either late this year or early next year. So I do actually believe that this leak is going to be true, because obviously we know that Jason Schreier has a good track record, and normally what he leaks does end up being true. So I do think the next Assassin's Creed game will be one focusing on Basim. Now, if the leak about the game being set in Baghdad and that being the sole location is true, the next question we need to be asking is, what will the story be? Will it just be Basim going around assassinating a bunch of targets? Or will it maybe show us how Hytham and Basim met? And I feel like that could be quite an interesting place for them to go, and maybe over the course of the game it could show Loki kind of manifesting in Basim, similar to what happens with Eivor over the course of Valhalla. Now, the fact that this was a DLC planned for Valhalla and it was turned into a full game makes me worried a bit, because the fact that they're going to be focusing on stealth is also worrying, because if you played Valhalla, then you know that the stealth isn't the best, even though they have just released an update that supposedly fixes it. But to be honest, I haven't seen much of a difference. So hopefully they don't stick with the RPG style of the game, and hopefully they go back to a similar control scheme that was seen in Assassin's Creed Unity and Syndicate. But as this was originally a Valhalla DLC, I think that is quite unlikely. If Ubisoft does do it, I will be very, very surprised. I'm not surprised that Baghdad will be the presumably main setting of the game, as if you've played any of the other DLCs for Valhalla, you know that there's normally one region you can explore and that's it. So Baghdad seems pretty plausible, and the fact that it's a big city similar to what was seen at the start of the Assassin's Creed series, hopefully they will update the parkour so you don't just hold X or A and then it does it automatically. Hopefully it does go back to a similar parkour style that was seen in Unity, for example, as I feel like out of all the Assassin's Creed games, that had probably one of the best parkour systems, even though the game as a whole was pretty janky. Something that I can actually see returning from previous Assassin's Creed games is black box assassination missions, as they were actually a part of the Siege of Paris DLC, and that was one of the points of the DLC that I actually quite enjoyed, because it actually felt like not old school Assassin's Creed, but it was kind of going back in that direction a tiny bit. So hopefully they bring over black box assassinations into Rift. I doubt they will mess with the formula too much, as they are probably planning most of the bigger changes for Assassin's Creed Infinity. Another point that I want to focus on is how long will the game be, as if this is a DLC, surely they're going to expand it. And before Dawn of Ragnarok came out, the DLCs for Valhalla were around 10 to 15 hours, but with the release of Dawn of Ragnarok, the story is supposedly supposed to take 35 hours, so maybe they wouldn't have to add too much to turn it into a full game. But hopefully they get rid of the missions where you have to go out into the open world and just do side stuff to progress the main story, as I feel like those were quite poor ways of extending the storyline of the DLCs. And I also hope that they don't copy Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where you have to do tons of mini arcs just to progress the main story, as I feel like that was just too much to do in a main story. I feel like if they'd cut like half the arcs and made them optional, that would have made the game flow a bit more easily, and it would maybe make people actually want to finish the game rather than putting it down halfway through. And the last bit I want to touch on quickly before we end up here is the release date. 2022 does seem fairly likely, as at this point in time we don't know what Ubisoft plans are for the rest of the year now. So I do think Assassin's Creed game maybe later in the year, like November, a similar time to when Valhalla was released, could be quite good. And when it could possibly be announced, my guess would be either they'd wait until E3 in June, or they would do something similar to Valhalla and kind of release a kind of trailer for the trailer as like an announcement thing. And maybe they could do that again, but my guess would be just waiting until E3. But that's all I have for this video. If you've liked it, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you in another video.